They weren't running. That is what haunts archaeologists the most. When the ash began to fall on Pompeii, the people didn't flee. They hid indoors and waited, and that decision sealed their fate in ways more horrifying than you've been told. You are standing in the Forum on the morning of the 24th of August, 79 AD. The air tastes like copper. Merchants are closing their shops early. No one's panicking yet, but everyone feels it. Something is wrong with the mountain. Vesuvius had been quiet for 800 years. The Romans didn't even know it was a volcano. They thought it was just a mountain. But beneath their feet, 4 miles of molten rock had been building pressure for centuries. The first explosion happened at 1 p.m. Witnesses 18 miles away described it as a pine tree made of smoke, rising 20 miles into the sky. But in Pompeii, you wouldn't have seen it. You'd have heard it, a sound like the earth itself cracking open. And yet, here is where it gets strange. For the next 6 hours, people stayed inside. They sheltered in place. They believed the roofs above them would protect them from the ash. But they didn't understand what was coming wasn't just ash. Pliny the Younger watched from across the bay. He wrote that the sky turned black as midnight, pierced only by flashes of lightning within the ash cloud itself. He described people tying pillows to their heads with cloth, desperately trying to protect themselves from the falling pumice stones. The pumice fell at a rate of 6 inches per hour. Light, porous rock raining from the sky like hail. You'd hear it hammering on your roof tiles. First a trickle, then a constant drumming that wouldn't stop. Inside your villa, the ceiling groans. Your family debates, stay or flee. The streets are chaos now. People running blind through the darkness, stumbling over pumice drifts already knee-deep. Some are crushed by collapsing buildings. Others choke on the ash-thick air. By midnight, 8 feet of pumice covered the streets. Pompeii was being buried alive, but most people were still breathing. The real horror was still 12 hours away. What no one in Pompeii understood was that Vesuvius was only warming up. The eruption column had reached 20 miles high, and now physics was about to betray everyone who had survived the night. At 6:30 a.m. on the 25th of August, the eruption column collapsed. Billions of tons of superheated gas, ash, and rock fell back toward the mountain, and then began racing down its slopes at 450 miles per h-hour. This was a pyroclastic surge, not lava, something far deadlier. A cloud of gas heated to 570 degrees Fahrenheit, carrying pulverized rock and moving faster than any human could comprehend, let alone escape. In Pompeii, buried under pumice and thinking the worst had passed, you might have felt the ground shake one final time. A hot wind would have forced itself through cracks in your walls. And then, the surge hit Pompeii at 7:30 a.m. It lasted 15 seconds. Every person still in the city died instantly. Not from the heat alone, but from something forensic scientists would only discover 2,000 years later. When the archaeologists uncovered Pompeii in the 1700s, they found bodies frozen in impossible positions, not buried peacefully, but contorted as if every muscle had seized at once. The question that haunted them, what could do that to a human body? Here is where it gets strange. The victims weren't crushed by debris. They weren't suffocated by ash. Their lungs were clear. Their bones were intact. But their bodies told a story of unimaginable agony. In 2001, forensic archaeologist Giuseppe Mastrolorenzo examined the bones under a microscope. He found something impossible. The victim's brain tissue had vaporized and then re-solidified as glass. This process is called vitrification. It requires temperatures above 900 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to boil your brain inside your skull in less than a second. But even that doesn't explain the positions of the bodies. And yet, they weren't trying to protect themselves from heat. Look closer at the casts. Their hands are pulled inward, knees drawn to chest, spine curved in what is called a pugilistic pose, the stance of a boxer. Forensic experts recognize this position from modern fire victims. It is not voluntary. It happens when extreme heat causes your muscles to contract with such force that they snap your own bones. Your body literally folds itself. But then researchers discovered something that changed everything. The heat alone couldn't account for how fast they died. Autopsies on the bone marrow revealed traces of iron and other metals, vaporized from their blood and deposited in their skeletons. This means their blood boiled so rapidly that it vaporized the iron in their hemoglobin. The pyroclastic surge didn't just kill them. It boiled them from the inside out in under 1 second. What no one expected was this. Some victims show evidence of trying to breathe afterward. Volcanic ash was found deep in their respiratory systems, which means they inhaled after the heat wave passed. They survived the initial surge, but only for seconds. Imagine surviving 570-degree heat, only to find yourself buried in darkness, unable to see, your lungs filling with powder. Fine ash with every breath. Your final moments spent drowning in volcanic dust. Here is where it gets even stranger. Not everyone in Pompeii was found in buildings. Some were discovered on the roads running toward the sea. But the evidence suggests they never saw it coming. The pyroclastic surge was denser than air, so it flowed through Pompeii like invisible water, filling low areas first, pouring through doorways, rising from the ground up. You couldn't see it. You could only feel the temperature spike, and by then you had 1 second left. One family was found sealed in a room together. The door was barricaded from inside. They'd stuffed cloth around the edges to keep the ash out. It didn't work. The surge found them anyway. But then archaeologists uncovered the Villa of Mysteries, and everything they thought they understood about Pompeii's final hours was called into question. This wasn't just a family home. It was a cult sanctuary. The walls are covered in frescoes depicting the Dionysian mysteries, forbidden rituals involving ecstatic worship, flagellation, and transformation. In one painting, a woman's face shows pure terror as a winged figure raises a whip behind her. And here is what keeps researchers awake inside this villa. They found a body positioned differently from all others in Pompeii. This person wasn't running, wasn't hiding. They were lying on a ceremonial bed, surrounded by ritual objects, as if waiting for death. This can't be coincidence. The Villa of Mysteries sits on high ground. They could have fled easily, but they stayed. Some researchers believe they interpreted the eruption as divine judgment, the return of Dionysus in fire and fury. What no one expected was finding similar ritual arrangements in 3 other villas. Bodies positioned ceremonially, surrounded by wine amphorae and religious artifacts, all facing Mount Vesuvius, not victims, participants. And yet, there is an even darker possibility. In 2018, archaeologists discovered a locked room beneath a Pompeii villa. Inside were 5 skeletons. But the door was locked from the outside. They weren't servants or slaves. Bone analysis showed high-status diet and lifestyle. So why were they locked underground during the eruption? Were they hiding something? Or was someone hiding them? The lock showed no signs of forced entry. The key was never found. 5 wealthy Romans died in darkness, sealed away by someone who knew exactly what was coming and left them to face it alone. Here is what forensic evidence revealed. They survived longer than anyone else in Pompeii. The basement provided temporary protection. They felt every tremor, heard every scream from above, and waited in total darkness for hours before the final surge found them. But then researchers found something that changed everything. Scratches on the walls. Not random, patterns, calculations. Someone down there was measuring time, tracking the eruption's progression. They knew exactly what was happening above. This means at least one person in that room wasn't a prisoner. They were an observer. Someone with knowledge of natural philosophy, voluntarily sealed underground, documenting the eruption as it killed them. But why? What no one can explain is the final calculation on the wall. It is a date, the 25th of August, 79 AD, written hours before the pyroclastic surge hit. They knew when they would die, and they stayed to record it. And here is the part that haunts archaeologists most. Those calculations were correct, down to the hour. Whoever wrote them understood what was happening better than anyone in the Roman world, and chose to die for that knowledge. So what really happened in Pompeii's final hours? The mainstream explanation is simple: natural disaster, wrong place, wrong time. But the evidence suggests something far more complex was unfolding. Theory 1. The Romans knew more than we think. Pliny the Elder, commander of the Roman fleet, didn't evacuate when Vesuvius erupted. He sailed directly toward it. His nephew wrote that he went to observe a phenomenon of great interest. He died on the beach at Stabiae. But here is what the letters don't mention. Pliny the Elder was carrying documents. Witnesses reported seeing him giving orders to scribes even as ash fell around them. What was he documenting? And where did those records go? Some researchers believe Pliny wasn't observing the eruption. He was retrieving something from Pompeii, something important enough to sacrifice his life for. But all records of that mission disappeared with him. Theory 2 is darker. Pompeii was a sacrifice. The cult of Dionysus believed in ritual death and rebirth. Ancient texts describe ceremonies where initiates would die to the world and be reborn through ecstatic suffering. And yet, volcanic eruptions were seen as manifestations of divine anger in Roman religion. Some scholars argue that the cult members interpreted Vesuvius not as disaster, but as apotheosis, the god coming to claim his faithful. This would explain why wealthy Romans with means to escape chose to stay in ritual positions. They weren't trapped. They were fulfilling what they believed was sacred duty, waiting to be transformed by divine fire. But here is where it gets strange. Modern analysis of the wine vessels found in ritual sites showed they contained something besides wine. Chemical traces of hallucinogenic compounds, specifically henbane and opium. This means some victims faced the pyroclastic surge while under the influence of powerful psychoactive substances. They didn't just accept death, they may have experienced the eruption as religious vision, a doorway to another realm. What no one expected was finding children's remains in these ritual contexts. Small bodies positioned ceremonially, surrounded by adult protectors. This wasn't evacuation failure. Entire families chose this fate together. Theory 3 is the one academics won't discuss publicly. Pompeii was already dying before Vesuvius erupted. An earthquake 17 years earlier had devastated the city. Many wealthy families had already fled. Those who remained were the desperate, the devoted, and the damned. Some researchers whisper about a darker possibility, that Pompeii had become a refuge for Rome's religious outcasts, practicing forbidden rites beyond the empire's reach. And when Vesuvius erupted, Rome did nothing to help, because they wanted these people gone. Here is what we know for certain. 2,000 people died in Pompeii in less than 24 hours. But the archaeological evidence suggests not all of them were trying to survive. The bodies tell different stories, some running, some hiding, some waiting with ritual precision. Pompeii's final hours weren't just a disaster. They were a revelation of how differently humans faced the certainty of death. And yet, the most haunting discovery isn't in the ruins. It is in the absence. Pompeii was a city of 20,000. Only 2,000 bodies have been found. Where are the other 18,000? Did they escape? Or are they still down there, buried in sections we haven't excavated yet, waiting in the darkness with their own stories of those final hours? Stories that might change everything we think we understand. Every year, new excavations reveal new victims. and with them, new questions. In 2021, they found two men who died holding hands. Brothers, lovers, friends. We'll never know, but their final act was choosing not to die alone. Here is what keeps me awake. Vesuvius is still active. It last erupted in 1944, and today, 3 million people live in its shadow. More than ever lived there in Roman times. The volcano hasn't forgotten. It is only sleeping. The Italian government has evacuation plans for 700,000 people to be executed in 72 hours. But the last time Vesuvius erupted with force comparable to 79 AD, the warning time was less than 24 hours. Do the math. So here is my question for you. If you knew you had 24 hours, would you run? Or would you, like some in Pompeii, choose something else? Because the bodies suggest that when death becomes certainty, humans don't all make the same choice. And that might be the most unsettling lesson Pompeii has to teach us.